You are now tuned in to the Project 365 experience.
It is awesome and amazing for me to get this opportunity to welcome a good friend of mine, Tanner Brightman, to the podcast. Tanner, welcome.
Awesome, yeah, thanks. We've been kicking it back and forth here for a while, so I'm glad to get on. And I've been checking on past guests and everything like that. So I feel grateful to be in pretty cool company.
Oh, appreciate it. Like we were saying before we started recording, we got this opportunity to just start talking a little bit, like during the pandemic. Like it's crazy where things have been now. Look at it, feels like it's so long.
I know, gosh, yeah. Just looking back at, I always try to tell people like the kind of story of golden ticket, and I'm like, oh, I use the pandemic as the start point, I guess. So it feels short and long at the same time.
Mm-hmm. It's just like I always tell people this. It's like, especially when you get this opportunity, because as humans we're very routine,
Mhm.
and like the pandemic allowed some of us to get out of those routines, start thinking things differently, and based on big events like that, we have this opportunity to either take an advance, do something new, advance ourselves, or
Yeah,
sometimes either stay the same. I'm not gonna say fall behind, or just like kind of like wait along and not do anything.
right.
Looking back at the pandemic, what do you think the biggest thing for you was in terms of personal growth?
Time, I think, to be honest with you. Yeah, like I think there was a lot of stuff that I had kind of on the side, I would say, or that I was like, scratching at when I had time apart from my, I guess regular 9 to 5. And then the pandemic hit, and as you know, it forced people to change how they live a little bit, but also how they work. And I think from that standpoint, it just opened up so much more time. And because I had that, and I was in front of the computer more too, I think, which is a
Mm-hmm.
pro and a con. But it just opened up that ability to actually get into some of the things that I had been waiting to do or had been thinking about, and try to align passion and profession at the same time. So
Mm-hmm. You would Okay, so because we gotta talk about it, because like it's so great to hear you say that, because I feel the exact same way.
mm,
I personally wouldn't be at Orangeville if I hadn't tried to take that step, because I
right.
tend to find that a lot of us were kind of like comfort in the situations that we were in, right?
Mm,
And what I ended up seeing was that when everything stopped, it kind of allowed us to start thinking bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you start paying attention to also the little things, right? You
mm.
start, time with your family, time with your loved ones, and all those things. And ultimately, my mentality has shifted, just not only in terms of basketball, but just in terms of how I view life. I don't know if you've felt that, or if you've been through it a little bit.
Yeah, I think a couple of different ones have come up, especially in the last 5 or so years. I mean, the first thing is being an entrepreneur, and I think that there's the freedom and flexibility of what that work potential has, which is freed up a lot of time, but it's also put me on call all the time too, right?
Yeah.
Again, yeah, good and bad. I'm as in control of my schedule as ever, but also, I have less control of my schedule depending on the day too. So there's that. I think becoming a father too, has changed how my time gets allotted. Yeah, thanks. And the combination of those two things, again, really in the last 18 months, moving back to Canada. I mean, lots of big life changes that have been amazing, but it's given me, I think, a different outlook on, as you said, what is important and how to structure my time and my day. And can I have a hard cutoff of when work stops and family starts, per se, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not very good at that yet, but I'm trying.
That's all we could do. We could only.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody's doing their best.
Yeah.
So talk to me about how the idea came about. Talk about Golden Ticket Sports.
Yeah.
And yeah, how does it start? How do you guys partner up and come up
Sure.
with the idea? The
Yeah,
execution too is what I'm very interested in knowing.
Yeah, pull it out of me here. Hopefully, I do a reasonable job explaining. Yeah, we never really intended it to be where it is today, and we never yeah, we were never really trying to make it the full-time thing. To be honest with you, we had started Golden Ticket purely because we needed a name, to operate under, and we were going to run these coaches development courses. And really add to the PD that our province or Western Canada really was offering. And I always ran a preseason camp for high school guys in the south of the province, and I didn't want to call it Tanner Brightman preseason camp. So I was trying to think of the name and what we were going to call it and everything like that. And I said, well, we'll invite the guys with these golden tickets, like Willy Wonka style, right? Charlie. And the Chocolate Factory. And I thought, okay, well, maybe Golden Ticket Sports sounds okay. And then we thought, okay, Golden Ticket Sports instead of just basketball, because Chris and I, the co-founder, we're multi-sport guys too. We believe in that and the opportunity that those provide. So we named it deliberately sports, even if we weren't sure when we would get to the other sports. We thought it would be there at some point. So long story short, we run these coaches clinics. We start with 15 people at the first year. We had 75 in the second year, had 155 plus in the third year. So we thought we were onto something. We had the international connection and kind of vibe going. And it was just going to be something that we did kind of in every province. We had good partnerships lined up with each of the different PTSOs. And then COVID hit. And I was still working at a high school, and Chris is still coaching his ACAC college women's program. So we basically said, all right, what are we doing? Do we take all this stuff online like everybody else was? And then he said, well, why don't we get our own sport facility? And I went, you're out of your mind, man. No, we shouldn't do that. And he wanted to do it in Lloydminster, where he's based, which is about 5.5 hour drive from where I am in Regina here. And I said, nah, I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think we should. Anyways, long story short, he convinces. We go from basically an 8,000 square foot warehouse that hadn't seen any love in 30 years to Hoop Factory as it is today. So that's been better part of 3.5 years there, and then that just got the ball rolling into everything that Golden Ticket is today. So we have that space. We've got another 45,000 square foot space in Moose Jaw, a little bit closer to me. That's got 12,000 square foot hardwood. It's got a strength and conditioning space, got full-size tennis court, indoor baseball, softball area, and some classroom space. And then we operate basketball, volleyball, hockey, and then some track and field, depending on parts of the province as well. So, yeah, there you go.
I've seen some of the pictures and just videos, and the facility looks amazing.
Yeah, it's been fun working on it. It's like a dream kind of project, and openly, people internally know this here, but I'm always looking at the Orangeville stuff for inspo and for for ideas. So there's definitely some carryover there from that, and then we got a chance to do the Moose Jaw facility kind of for a second time because we had a terrible roof leak when they were redoing the roof. So we had the entire hardwood space had to be pulled out and replaced. So we got to do the logoing and everything like that again, which I think we got it right. It was great the first time, but it wasn't as cohesive. But the second time, I think we nailed it.
I love you guys just thinking big. And you mentioned a good point about coach education.
Yeah.
And so I want to know, why did you tap into coach education? Why was that such a big point of why you guys wanted, like you said, PD, professional development, right? Why did you look into that?
I think when I was doing the provincial team stuff, I did Basketball Sask men's program for 8 years, and it was always hard to just to find the right time to do it. And I think it was high on everybody's want list, but pretty low on everybody's need list, and from every standpoint, even those who were responsible for organizing it. And we basically just said, well, instead of a few of us going to Vegas each year, or insert the location to go and try and get better, we got a pretty good network, a pretty good connection for people all over the world. Could we bring them into Saskatchewan and have it be based there instead? So that's really where it derived from, was trying to fill a bit of a gap, and selfishly it was for us to get better, right? And if other people that we didn't know came on board, then that was an added benefit. But we were doing it for ourselves first, and whoever followed up would be good.
The pandemic allowed us to kind of start thinking about things differently. And I keep circling back to that because, like you said, you guys were able to grow it by starting to think internationally.
Yeah.
How impactful or not, right? I don't know. How impactful or not has it been to be able to talk with all these different coaches to help with your curriculum or your subjects that you guys are looking for coaching development, coaching education?
Sure. Yeah. It's been incredibly helpful. And I think in two ways, like one, even if we didn't agree per se with what Coach A or Coach B was saying, it helped us reaffirm what we did believe in. Right. Second to that, we were also trying to connect with people who were in similar circumstances or similar athletes, that they're working with, right? Like the Belgian connection that we have there with Jurk and crew. They are working with similar body types, they're working with similar age groups, they're working with similar timelines within the year. So it was a pretty good comparable, to be able to reference points and to work back and forth from. So I think above all else here, the company was founded on, working with good people. And that's what we've tried to do. We tried to search out good people all over the globe, both on the floor and off the floor.
Looking at coach education, how do you guys approach it? How do you compartmentalize it based on ages? Is it based on coach experience? How do you look at it? I know it's a general question, but I want to know, what do you look at?
Yeah, sure. We think of it from the standpoint of backwards design, and when athletes would finish with us, what do we want them leaving with as they go into their post-secondary endeavors? So right now the program is set up from the basketball standpoint, but it would be the same for volleyball and hopefully the same for hockey. Is that we're under 13 to under 18, give or take, right? So they've got potentially 6 to 7 years with us if they were at the start to at the end. So once they leave, what are the set of skills, both on the floor and off the floor, that we want them to be, taking into their next program to be desirable and recruitable? And from that, we start at the oldest age group and just work our way down here, right? So the staircases, then we go back up and make sure that those things are aligned. So there's a set of skills, like even just finishing, right? There's a set of finishing skills that are required at the 13 age group that we teach to the 14 age group, to the 15 age group, et cetera, and all the way through. Same thing, tactics and strategies. Same thing, building your basketball resume. What's important as a 17-year-old is not the same thing that's important as a 13-year-old, right? And everything in between. And then because we're in a province that is vast in terms of space in between people,
sure.
because we're trying to work with the entire province, geography and topography are the greatest hindrance to our developments in our cause, kind of, right? It's hard to get everybody together all the time. So what we've done this fall from a coach development standpoint, but also just from an athlete development standpoint, is we've gotten together for 5 block weekends. And in each of those weekends, there's about 2 to 3.5 hour coaches meeting that is all derived around this stuff. How are we, like last weekend, we were talking, okay, how are we actually playing in transition, teaching in transition? What does that look like once we get into the half court, et cetera, right? And it's great because we've got people with all different levels of experience, success, doing different stuff. But finding what's best for the club and the athletes that we have now is, what my responsibility is to try and take everybody's concepts and ideas here and make it into a golden ticket brand of basketball. So,
Yeah. So it's so interesting because, like you said, you look at this, like, what is it that they need when they're done, like 18, and then you kind of try to reverse engineer it in a way. For a coach that's coming into a situation, right? Most of the times coaches will start with maybe those that are a bit more underdeveloped, right? So it's more likely that a new coach will start with a younger age group, right? So going into that situation, what does the coach need to know to be able to help these younger athletes move up? Because if you gotta, if you're not around, like let's say the I'm going to use your model. If you're not around the 18-year-olds, right? You potentially don't have this ability to see or know yet what it is. You could always learn,
Sure.
but like, how do you seek out the resources
To back up
to learn? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. To back up on that, I think we got a bit of a flawed system actually in coaching as well, though, too, because I
Agreed.
think
Sure.
we do exactly that. We stick the most inexperienced coach per se, and maybe not experienced, but just relative to that. Or everybody wants to coach the best under 18 team, like that's what people's desire is to do, right? But we say, okay, the kid's first introduction to the club or to basketball in general, but use the club for example, we want that to be the best experience, because if they have a poor experience in their first year, whoever's coaching, they're less likely to come back, and we're less likely to retain them as athletes. We try to curb that a little bit. Like there's certain people who are best to work with under 13 kids, and there's certain people who are best to work with under 18 kids. We're fortunate in the club here that we've got right around the 25-ish coach mark, and we actually meet next week to assign who's going to which teams, just based on what's the best fit, right, for the kids and for the coach. But to your point on trying to seek out knowledge and to work through that, we're really trying to develop a curriculum that is internally based and actually fits on what we're doing, and I got to give my Belgium experience a ton of credit there. Like, it was evergreen from the standpoint of it was always evolving, but there was some core things that, regardless of the age group here, was being delivered and taught, right?
I think we're getting somewhere here.
Okay.
I think because like we're aware of listen, we're gonna change the game, Tanner. This is serious right here. We're gonna change the game.
Yeah.
Think about this.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be with the more experienced players, right? But a lot of times the more experienced players are the ones that are the most self-sufficient. They don't necessarily need you per se, in a way, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So Tanner, how do we rework the system then? Because if you're saying that the more experienced coaches, the more experienced coaches are with the more experienced players, and then the less experienced players, like the introduction to a lot of coaches that want to get into coaching is with those younger players. What are some things that we can do to make it better?
Yeah, certainly. I think we got, for lack of a better term, we got to sell it. Like we actually have to make that the connection between high quality coaching and introductory basketball is what makes a kid's experience, lifelong, right? Or has the potential to. And I think people got to get attached to that from a heartstring component as well, right? It's like the ego that into coaching, again, later developed athletes is big, and again, we wish for that for all of our programs. I think that's the reality. But coming back to it here, I think your impact, to your point, right, on what you can do with a 13-year-old who's got a bit of a blank canvas versus, an 18-year-old who's got 10 plus years of playing potentially, there's just a different level of impact that you can have there, right? And for us, we think of it in a bit of a pyramid model, right, that the base of the club and the base of the organization is the most important kids are the 13s and 14-year-olds, right? Because they've got the potential to be with us the longest time. They've got the potential to have the biggest growth, for us to have the most long-lasting impact on. So we try to reframe it a little bit. I don't think it's easy, and I don't think it's a one sport fits all thing. I think it's everybody's like that,
I'm starting to think potentially, because I'm thinking back to when I first started coaching, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you go into it and you're like, okay, listen. So I first started coaching grade 5, grade 6. And the first thing I thought about was, listen, I'm going to turn these guys into the Kentucky Wildcats.
Right. Yeah.
And the first thing I did was I got playbooks. I said, we're going to run 12 plays. We're going to have 15 press. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And it's like, I almost think like going into it, I didn't really have, and this is just me talking about my personal experience, but I never really had a guideline, right? It's kind of like you think that you can, by me having played, I can just teach anybody how to play.
Right.
But the structure and the steps that go into it, I'm starting to realize that there's not a lot of coaches that have patience.
Mm.
Because you know what I'm saying? Because like I think like going into it, if you get all the best players, you're gonna win a lot of games. Of course, you're gonna look good.
Sure, for sure.
But can you help somebody who is new to basketball? Can you teach them the steps to it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think we have the disconnect.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think that relative to the club and our stuff, we talk about it to the parents, to the kids, and to the coaches. Like the club is a 100-year project. You know, it's supposed to outlast everybody that's in the club right now, right? And if we do a good job in year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, and ongoing, then it's got the potential to do that, right? And right now we're laying the groundwork for year 10 and year 20 and year, et cetera, and things like that. So yeah, I think I was with you on the coaching standpoint here too. I think of how much better the group that I first started coaching would be after I had 5 or 6 years of doing it versus when I first started,
Like, so tell me about how, the Belgian experience that you had, like just like, and also other international. What are you seeing that we're doing maybe not right, or what are you seeing that is different in their systems?
Yeah, I mean there's a fair bit of difference. And
By the way, by the way, I don't know. Just drop in a little bit, like just what in terms of like in Belgium and all that kind of
yeah.
stuff. What are you doing and all that kind of
Sure,
stuff? Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'll let's see 90-second overview. I
Hit me.
yeah, of course. I worked with a club called Elite Academy over there, and as I said, 13 to really 21-year-olds within the club, about 8 teams when I was there. I was responsible for coaching one of the under 20 teams and then assistant with the men's team. From that, I was also responsible for the operations of the club as well when I was there. So I went over with what I thought were going to be some solutions per se here to some of the problems that they were having, just because I thought they were similar problems to we were having. But the sport infrastructure is quite different, and therefore my solutions were not actually all that valid or couldn't be used. So the some of the big differences I think that I picked up while being over there is the sport infrastructure is different, right? Like the cost to play sport over there is quite cheap if you compare it to North America.
Mhm.
And as such, I would say, North America, whether rightfully or wrongfully, has gone to a pay to play model, and I think it's only going to continue going that way. Belgium in particular, there also is a pay component, but it might cost you 200 euros for the entire year, to play any sport, at the highest level in the country, right? So it's just different. Renting a gym, using Saskatchewan as an example, might cost you between 55 to $125 per hour. It would cost you
Mhm.
6 to 8 euros per hour to rent a gym there, right? The private facility component really isn't a thing in Belgium. It's city owned or professional clubs, that have their own facilities. So that made it challenging too, just from trying to run high performance basketball. And then again, rightfully or wrongfully, I'm not sure. I'm sure people would have differing opinions, but there really isn't multi-sport within the sport infrastructure if you're involved basically from 11 to 21. If you're playing basketball, at a high level, you're playing it year round. You really don't have the capacity, just time wise, to be able to play anything else, right? And they're envious of how some of us have it, where you'd play in each different sports season throughout the course of the year, right? And you'd play football in the fall, or you play volleyball, and then you get into basketball through the winter seasons. They don't really have that. And at the same time, I think some of us are going, oh, it'd be nice to have our athletes year round too, right? So it's yeah,
Everybody thinks the grass is greener, eh?
for sure, yeah. I don't know that there's too much else. I think because of the FIBA game, right? I mean, the fact that we're both playing the same rules, Canada to Belgium was clear. And then from a national involvement, like from the federation, I would also say relatively similar. The population of Belgium is about 11 million people, but it's in a country size that is significantly smaller than Saskatchewan, which has got 1 million people in it, right? So it's a more
Mhm.
condensed population dense area. So you'd have a 10-kilometer radius that might have 8 or 10 clubs in it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's definitely easier when you have like people almost quote unquote on top of each other,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you almost run into competition by accident.
Hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it's like I think just thinking about it, and I've been very fascinated by just I'm not educated on it as much, but I'm very fascinated by what's going on in Europe, right?
Mm,
And it's like you're looking at these guys that by the time they're 14, they're able to just play with like certain, obviously the special ones are able to play like in like a professional
yeah,
kind of like setting and all that kind of stuff, right? Which I always found is very interesting. So it's just like there's a part of me that is kind of thinking that like, well, why are we playing? Why are we coaching basketball? Why are we playing basketball? Like, what's the main goal? And I kind of find that if the country as a whole, right? If the country the specific country in Europe as a whole is able to understand, or just like a federation, like you said, is able to understand why they do certain things, it makes it easier, right? Than to push everybody kind of like in that same direction for it to be productive. Because like you said, I see it. And it's like in a lot of situations, you sometimes feel like, well, kids are playing basketball just to play basketball, just to play games and all that kind of stuff. But the intent behind certain organizations sometimes may be more financially driven.
sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
for
it's,
sure.
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think too, like even just on the practice to game comparison, right? You know, we were practicing over there 4 to 5 times a week and playing once on the weekend, right? Which
Right.
which is the norm, I would say, more so, you know, right? Where I can't speak for everywhere in Canada, but I just think of, you know, we had high school season start last week. Well, they had tryouts on Monday. The first game was Thursday. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like it's bang, you're right into it, and you're playing as much or maybe more potentially on where you go to school than you're practicing. Well, it's a pretty tough model to develop, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think we've gotten too transfixed on playing all the time, I think, in North America, you know.
Like
And I think
games. Mm-hmm.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. And I think we gotta make practice sexy somehow again,
Yeah.
you know, right? Which is not easy, but it's necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's give the coaches something practical, right? Like you get this opportunity to be around all these talk about like the workshops that you've
Hmm.
got the opportunity to just hold virtually,
Yeah.
right? And all that kind of stuff. Like what are some drills and ideas that you think you've gotten the chance to assist in bringing back to the coaches here? What are
Hmm.
something that you've seen that you've gotten good feedback on that you think will help a lot of this generation of athletes?
Sure. I think practically, I think when you first get into coaching, you're like, okay, I want to learn to your point here about the Kentucky stuff, like how many steps
Mm-hmm.
can we run, all this stuff, right? And then you get to like a middle stage, I think, this is my own experience where you're like, okay, I gotta have like the best small sided games, I gotta have, you know, all the drills, all that kind of stuff. But I think it takes people like into the third kind of progression of their coach to understand like, yeah, that stuff is important here, but if you're not a connector with your athletes and if they don't buy into what you're selling, you know, right? They the line that we use all the time is they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And we've spent a lot of time talking about that. I know I referenced last week and we talked specifically transition, but sessions before that are all derived on, you know, do we actually know the group that we're with? Like how deeply do we connect, right? One of the club standards is that we say hi. Like, and it's just as plainly and simple as that here too. Like every person that you cross, like you connect with, you give a fist bump, you check in, you say what's up. And it's weird for people to do that with everybody at the start, but it becomes built into the ethos of what you do. So to give something practical to come hopefully back to your question and give people, you know, just that, can you search out an athlete or multiple athletes over the course of your practice and really try to get them to know them deeper on a human level, right? The exercise that we do that we took from another club was this idea of Triple H, so that each athlete and coach speak to a hero in their life, a hardship that's happened, right? And the ability to go through those two things really, really frames their highlight of their life too. So hero, hardship, and highlight. Those three things, it's amazing the vulnerability that athletes and coaches show once you do that. And we've always had the coach go first in that exercise, and it really it just sets a deeper level of understanding of vulnerability between the group.
And now it's almost like coming back full circle, because I think, to me, I don't think you could see it, but you gave me goosebumps just talking about that, man. I was just getting goosebumps. But I think this goes back full circle to what I was saying, right? So obviously when I first started coaching, it was like, let me get as many plays, as many drills, as many this, as many that, right? And like, I thought I was doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward now, pretty young in my coaching career, 8 years, right? If you were to walk into my practices now compared to how they were before, I think you would think that the coach back then knew more drills, was able to kind of like show more drills, and then the coach now. And it's so weird because I feel like I'm a bit like more experienced. So let me explain. The point that you said about connectivity, I have a great group of kids this year. And it's like, if you walk into one of our practices this year, you will probably feel like, Coach O's not doing anything. He's just there. You know what I'm saying? But the point you said about connectivity is huge, because I feel more connected to my players as ever.
Mm-hmm.
And from then, it's easier to coach them.
Yeah.
So then when you see us play, you look at players that are not looking over their shoulders. You're looking at players that, obviously things are so simple. And like, that's the key that I see. The older I got, the more I kept things so simple, because to me, creativity and, like you said, connectivity are my most two important parts.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's one thing to recognize that that's, important, right? But it's another thing to go out of your way to find, the athlete that you don't have like just a instant connection with, and really try to hone in and work on that, right? And it's easy for people to go and sit beside somebody they like. Yeah, of course. But can you go and do that with people who are involved in the club or on the team or on the program that maybe you don't see eye to eye with or anything like that, but you got to work together for the common good of the goal that you're trying to approach. But then you're getting somewhere, I think.
It's so funny, because it's almost like the more I wanted to learn about basketball, the more I started seeing like, there's only so many ways that everybody, like, there's only so many plays, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep.
Like you get this opportunity to see all these coaches click and all that kind of stuff, and it's like they all come back to pretty much the same thing,
Truthfully, like, we've heard hundreds, of coaches present and speak. I remember very little, like, from the offensive, defensive, tactics, strategy stuff. Truthfully, like, I think of some of the organizational techniques. I think of some of the competitive advantage, ideas and concepts. These connectors, exercises like that. Because the rest of those things, I mean, you can get on YouTube now. The basketball world is as accessible as ever here, between Twitter, YouTube, and everything like that, to find out here if you need a quick hitter versus 1-3-1 or whatever the thing is, right? You can go and search that stuff out, but being able to have things that connect, it's super valuable.
That makes the biggest point. Holy, thank you so much, Tanner. I'm about to head into just a couple final questions, but
Sure.
before, thank you so much for taking the time. I know how busy you are.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What would you say is the next step for Golden Ticket Sports?
We got to refine, I think. We got to, like, really hone in on our processes and things like that. We've gotten big, like, I'll say that in quotations, and good, and to your point earlier here, we kind of have swung at everything, that's made sense, right? And fortunately, it's worked out more times than it hasn't. But in doing that, we've gone at this rapid pace, and we got to go back and refine some stuff now. We really gotta we got to take the time to do stuff that takes time. Like, and fortunately and unfortunately, like from an outside optics standpoint, it's not like, again, it's not sexy stuff that we're going to be doing for the next year. Like we had our year-end review at the end of October, and that was really the consensus, is like, yeah, we can't really take on anything else until we get some, just base level processes refined and worked on. So I wish I had a more glamorous answer for you, but I don't.
That's what we need. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Let me any future workshops and things that coaches may be able to attend, whether it's virtually, whether it's when they're in town, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. One thing that we've been kicking around for a long time, and I don't know when it's going to happen, but I think it will happen, is you go to a coach's clinic, or you're online or anything like that, but you're not really ever present. Do you know what I mean? Right? It's like online, even our meeting here now, like I've got my phone going off here, I've got my second screen, like stuff's happening, right? So we've been talking about the idea of a retreat, and to bring in people that would facilitate that, but also then from a basketball coach's standpoint, you'd be along with people who are as invested in it, as you, right? So real small group that we'd find somewhere nice to stay, and you try to be as present both physically and mentally as possible for a 2.5 day, 3 day deal. You got the nature component, and I think that's probably the next coach's development piece that we want to hit on. But when that will be, I don't know. But I know it's the next phase for us.
If you need coaches, sign me up.
Likewise,
that we've been talking about this. So
yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely.
Oh, Mr. Brightman, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate everything you're doing for our country, and you just being able to help coaches just be educated, be more aware of certain things, and you being able to help and assist making this game so accessible. So I appreciate you so much, my friend. Looking forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, likewise, buddy. Yeah, and the same to you here for a podcast like this, and connecting the country here through different voices. So thanks for the opportunity and the platform.